Welcome to Darkly Lit, where we sail out to the middle of the ocean, hopefully to find freedom, but instead we are surrounded by death. I'm your host, Kayla King. I'm joined by my other two wonderful co-hosts. We have Sade.
I think I got a bite.
And we have David.
You know, when SpongeBob says, barnacles, as like a swear, I get it. You might want to be careful reeling that thing in, though, Sade. It's thrashing pretty good.
Are we going to just do nautical terms and pirate terms? Arr, matey.
Well, if nautical nonsense be something you wish. You brought me on this show, so yeah.
Buckle in.
Oh boy, this is going to be a bumpy ride. Or bumpy boat ride.
A very bumpy boat ride.
So, we had just finished reading Sacculina by Philip Fraccassi, and this was a short one, which was kind of nice after reading the long Devil in the White City. Now, Devil in the White City was still a good book, don't get me wrong, but it's still a long book. The plotline's fairly simple. We are joined by this family. We have Jim, who's our lead, his older brother Jack, who has just been released from prison, their dad Henry, and Jack's friend Chris. And they've decided they want to go on a fishing trip to celebrate Jack's release from prison. And they are joined by Captain Ron, which is hilarious to me. I'll talk about that later. And Captain Ron's like, yeah, we should not go fishing. It's kind of choppy waters out there, so we probably should cancel. And Jack's like, well, hold on. If it's just choppy, then, and not like we're going to be in any danger, I just want to go. Come on, like, we just want to go fishing, man. And Captain Ron's like, all right, your funeral, literally. So they go. The waters are a bit choppy, and he says, if you'd like, we can go an hour out more where the water's more calm. And they're like, yeah, we're here already. So they go out an extra hour. And they go fishing. They're drinking beer. Jim's sick, though, because he's rarely on a boat. And actually, I don't think any of them have gone fishing before. This is their first time deciding, let's go fishing, because Jack just wants to, because he wants to do something as a family, especially since it wasn't long ago when their mother passed away.
Right.
And they're still reeling from that as well. They're out there, and Chris catches a fish, and this fish is covered in barnacles, which is strange because what is it? Was it like a sea bass or something like that? Or
yeah, a sea bass.
At least it's not a sea bass.
I knew it was gonna come up at some point.
Sorry.
Oh! I haven't forgotten the plague that is sea bass.
But this is not a common thing, says Captain Wrong. Like, barnacles are not supposed to hook onto sea bass, and usually it takes a very long time for them to do that. And they look at it and they realize, ooh, this is kind of a creepy thing, especially when the thing is basically trying to eat them when it glues itself on. So Chris throws the barnacle into the water, and then later on they spot a bubble coming up from the ocean, and they look over, and Henry's hand suddenly gets caught with a couple barnacles, and they have already glued themselves on, which is it's supposed to take forever for them to glue themselves on. And he's saying, I'm in pain, it's eating at me, it hurts. And this is one of the most discomforting parts. Jack's like, okay, we're just gonna rip it off. He's like, please no, and then does it.
Yeah.
And so they realize we probably should get back. This is not going to be a good idea. And then they realize there are barnacles covering the full edge of the boat. And they weren't there before. As a result, the boat's not working, so they are stuck. And then this leads to deaths of Captain Ron, who we're not sure if he just intentionally died. Jim was asleep during that. That was a weird thing. This leads to Henry's death as he falls over, and then Chris dies, and the only one who survives is Jim at the end, as he's rescued by another ship, but unfortunately the barnacles have already got to him, and they seem to already infect his brain and become the parasites that they actually are.
Dun dun dun.
I'm not as wonderfully detailed as Sade.
Am I really? I don't. That's as detailed as I get too. No, I feel like I jump around and forget shit, and then go back and be like, oh yeah, and this happened. You did great.
Yeah, it was awesome. Honestly, there's only so much you can talk about because it's very quickly told, and It was not the horror I was expecting, but rapidly horrifying parasitic barnacles is kind of a neat angle. I like that right away. Do we like the horror of the
Yeah,
barnacles?
yeah, yeah. I was kind of wondering, like, I wonder where this will go. They're out fishing. The Barnacles was a surprise, and the build up toward it was really great. I had a good time reading this.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's a nice little short story. It honestly, this is the perfect length for what this type of story is.
Yeah.
It delivered the exact horror that I enjoyed in this concise thing. This was great. It is a lovely, uncomfortable novel. The thing is, though, as it's not exactly a deep novel either.
Yeah, I mean they definitely do characterizations. They give us, characters that we can, we get a sense of it, but it's not like there's any deeper themes going on here that like relate to say the family's relationship with the sea or anything. It's just kind of you get to know them as characters and they just happen to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. But the reason there's that one significant part where I think this hadn't been a problem until they happen to be there when there's some sort of like geothermal event under the ocean that probably pushes all of those barnacle larvae paras the like most basic form of them to the surface, which is that
Mm-hmm.
part when they suddenly see a big sulfurous bubble rises to the surface and bursts, and that's when things start to go. It's after that that things start to go wrong. They start seeing the barnacles starting to appear on the hull of the boat, and you kind of forget about that bit for a section, and then I remember because unfortunately Captain Ron does that lovely line about like, "Well, the ocean let out a wicked fart," and we're basically sitting right on the asshole.
Okay, speaking of humor, I'm kind of surprised he chose the name Captain Ron because, for those who don't know, Captain Ron is a 1992 film, and Captain Ron is played by Kurt Russell with an eye patch. And the whole thing is a comedy about this family just going on a boat trip while Captain Ron just makes things wacky and wild. So the whole thing is a comedy with like silly antics. Unfortunately, because I've seen this movie and my brain, when I saw Captain Ron, my brain automatically associated with it, but I don't know many people who have seen this film, so it's fine. Like, for what it is, it's fine. It's just one of those, like, damn, I am having trouble not imagining Captain Ron as Kurt Russell with the eye patch right now.
That kind of makes it fun, though.
It even made it better with the whole fart line too. And then I imagine Kurt Russell with an eye patch saying, "Oh, the ocean let out a big fart." Oh, you know what? I have a question for you, Sade.
Okay.
Did you ship Jack and
I
Chris?
I knew that was coming because I was like, huh, did I ship those two? And I actually didn't.
I was wondering
Yeah, you
if
think I
if
would have, but I didn't. I don't know. I didn't. There was no subtext there for me to be like. I mean, I think there was enough there to read that there was like, yeah, okay, they have a bond, and there's like maybe something unspoken between them, in just that they, have always been friends. And normally, yes, I pick up on the slightest bit of subtext and I make it gay, but I didn't this time. I don't know why. Maybe I was a little more focused on just like the whole barnacle thing was more intriguing to me at that moment. We were saying, it doesn't touch on like really deep issues or any like deep themes beside the ocean, but
Mhm.
I don't know. I think it did touch on just like kind of like the bonds that we have from just family a little bit. Like you don't get to really choose your family, and sometimes you stick through it, sometimes you don't. I don't know. I thought there were some interesting themes there, and just kind of like the brotherliness between Jack and Jim, and then like their way their interaction with their father. I think was pretty interesting. I guess, yeah, it could have been gayer because I didn't even think of it. So, but I'm not complaining.
Yeah, again, it's not when I bring up the point about the characters earlier. It's not really a complaint. There, it's fine. It's just it's not again. It's not like the barnacles tie in with the theme of like family bonds or anything like that. These are just we know the characters and we know what they're struggling with, and the horror just happens to them. It's very surface level horror. I mean,
But it's a good surface level horror.
yeah, I don't mean that as a bad thing at all. There's not we don't we need to hyper analyze anything because the story doesn't have that. It's about the barnacles. It's about this slow creeping horror, which is done really well. I mean, and it's conceivable that it would have this effect that you might run into something like this, and that's where yeah, the book really shines in that it sets up its horror and it's the situation that makes it horrific really well.
Oh, by the way, I wanted to look up the term Sacculina because I thought it was just, oh, is that just the typical term for barnacles? It's not. It's a type of barnacle, and it's a horrifying one. Like, Wikipedia calls it, no joke, a parasitic castrator of crabs.
Oh,
Oh shit, I think I've heard of them. Okay.
Yeah. And they don't even look like the typical barnacles that you see on a ship either. Like, they're ugly looking. And like they are the legitimate definition of parasites that take over the bodies of crabs. So what you see that happens to Jim, that's
that
yeah.
explains the ending, which is why
Yes.
his that's actually a part I really liked was the ending where he's panicking and then like as he's starting to feel the sensation of things moving through him, he actually starts he thinks about the ocean, but now he's thinking about how much he wants to get back on land, and you realize that the way he's looking at things and describing things, even from a third person perspective, has shifted, and now he's just a host.
Yeah, the way he starts describing and just like speaking of everything is like euphoric.
Mm-hmm.
And like what better way to keep control of your host and than to make them think they're happy or pleasured or whatever. Yeah, no, I'm looking at pictures of these things now and it's gross.
Mm-hmm.
It's really gross.
It's not what I imagined while reading. I don't know which is worse.
The ending itself is a very good ending because Jim basically feels misery all throughout this book, and all he's kind of almost known is misery. Like, along with basically nearly being killed by his brother, his mother dying, his brother being arrested, and then once they're on the boat, the first thing that happens is he feels sick. He just feels unhappy throughout this trip. He's filled with fear. And I think this is like the first time you actually see Jim as being happy for once.
And it comes at the expense of being controlled by the euphoria from a parasite.
Yeah.
Wow. There
This
you go. I didn't think about that, but wow, you're right.
should we get to questions?
Yeah.
Because the questions actually have some poignant thoughts. Actually, questions and comments. I'm going to start with Bringer of Lighters. Thank you, Bringer, because he just provides a comment. He said, "It was a good read. I'm confused why the barnacles aren't a world problem. That would be pretty sick to find out. Also, Chris is pretty cool for saying fuck them barnacles." It feels like the barnacles are actually just contained in this one area.
Mhm.
Yeah. Well, because we had that notion of like, oh, there was like suddenly a little eruption. That's probably the source. So maybe this is the first time they're breaking into open water. We don't know. We're it's a little bit just we're just getting this one little segment, and who knows? Maybe it's just suddenly happening in other parts of the water. But yeah,
It's concentrated to this area because they caught that fish. There's some seismic activity has caused them to or seismic or geothermal or something has caused them.
or climate change.
Oh,
Yep.
or climate change. Oh, that's true. Because again, Captain Ron said he'd fished in that spot before. And he'd been in this area for years, and he'd never seen anything like the what happened to the sea bass. So this is something recent. And again, the implication here is that something has churned them up and brought them to the surface more recently.
We have a comment and question from Dan or Urkelbot666. Thank you, Dan. I liked the story and enjoyed the unexplained weirdness. For some reason, I had trouble discerning some of the characters in this, even though they are pretty decently defined. I did notice that I struggled with Jack and Jim.
Yeah,
I think for me, it's because their names are a bit too similar in my brain.
because they both have that J. They both have a J starting name that starts with J. I do think though there were parts where I read it where I think the author meant to say the other.
Yeah, I noticed
I
that
do
too.
feel like there were a couple of times where I was like, I'm pretty sure it makes more sense if like Jim or Jack is the one saying this. So I think that did happen, and that got a little confusing.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's actually kind of a pet peeve of mine when I'm writing. Whenever I make characters, I need to make sure that their names have like different letters or their names start with different letters or if the names do start with the same letter, they need to be as completely different or sounding as far apart from each other as possible. Because I struggle to like remember. Okay, we got this character, this character, this character, and I it's my way of keeping them organized if I have them have different names that start with letters. But as a result, I'm like, okay, I have an A name, a B name. Do I have okay, how about a C name? Do I have that yet? But that's just me as a writer, so the monster slash body horror stuff was good, and anything that takes place way out in the open water at the mercy of angry sea creatures tends to be fun. And super barnacles are a cool idea for a monster. Absolutely, I agree with this.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
What an unexpected idea for a horror, like, and it's a good one too.
Barnacles are usually set dressing, so to have them be the major threat is very inspiring.
Yeah, it's unexpected because you wouldn't you look at a barnacle and it's like, okay, cool, that's kind of cool looking, and then I don't know, but yeah, it was a cool idea. I really enjoyed it. There was that one part where they described like this just like black beard of barnacles hanging off the bottom of the boat, and you could just kind of picture it floating in the depths, and that was really eerie to me, and that still is stuck in my head.
Yeah, I have that too because I think about it almost like the way when everybody talks about iceberg theories and they always show an iceberg.
Right. Yeah. But it's just this long drifting tail of barnacles that is just growing bigger and bigger and slowly pulling the boat down. It's like, yeah, okay, that fucking slaps.
Yo.
I think my favorite part was the flashback of the brothers' fight over the video game. I like the portrayal of how quickly things can go south when young kids who know better but haven't quite learned better yet, if that makes any sense. I actually want to talk about this because that was also another horror that surprised me was the fact that Jack nearly killed Jim over a fight with about a game. How do we feel about this? What did you guys think? What do you think it contributed to the story?
I thought it was interesting detail, like little bit of added information to put in there, because it's like a formative moment in like their relationship where it's like I feel like it was a moment where there was like a divide that formed between them, but they're still brothers, so they were still close, and maybe it's like something that they like never discussed after that. I could see that. Just making assumptions because that's what I do when I read, but I don't know. I thought it was interesting because like, and it made sense to me because if you're like a child, you have all these like strong emotions. You don't know how to cope with them yet, and it was believable to me that that moment could happen between brothers.
I think it's interesting because I completely agree with that, and it also kind of highlights, I think, in a way, the foreshadows that Jack is someone who is, at least from our main character's perspective, someone who is capable of doing something like that, of having those moments, because there is that moment when I don't know if it's presented super specifically, but Jim is almost questioning whether Jack and Chris actually did just find Captain Ron dead or if they did something to him.
Yeah.
Like knowing that his brother is capable of going that far, and you're almost left wondering, even with Henry wondering about it. It's like since their father is clearly a little bit addled. Like, did they go far as to potentially murder Captain Ron to use his body as like an experiment? Like, we don't know. But I mean, I believe them when they say that he probably just had a heart attack. But there is always that kind of like the coldness of the way they kind of do it. I think is foreshadowed a little bit by like, or at least in Jim's mind, is foreshadowed by that flashback.
Mm-hmm. It kind of explains why Jim was kind of like okay with the explanation that he was given. But I did get the sense of like I don't think they outright and killed him with the intention of like using him as a test, but I could see like people getting frustrated and a fight breaking out, and maybe Jack pushing or hitting the captain too hard that he falls and triggers a heart attack or hits his head, and I don't know. It's and then like Henry just being like giving excuses because it kind of sounded like he didn't really know. Like he was just throwing out excuses of what could have happened because he's still trying to protect Jim, even if that's like the truth of like your brother just killed a man.
But in that sort of thought too, that actually adds to the discomfort that occurs in this novel because by the end of it, it's Jack that's saying, "Okay, Jim, you got to do this. We got to jump. That's is how it's going to be." And Jim's not sure what to do, and already he knows his brother is possibly capable of a murder, and then with it, he's not even sure if he possibly killed Ron. So there's this sort of like, and he hasn't seen his brother for quite a while. He just came back from prison, so
I think Jim is very much aware of what his brother is capable of and kind of turns a blind eye to it. And I think from Jack's perspective, like that moment where he was like crying with his mother because he almost killed his brother was formative for him in that like he's also aware of what he's capable of. But he knows he has to protect his brother from not just life and circumstances and the sea and the barnacles, but also from himself.
yeah, because another formative part of that flashback is the fact that their mother tells Jack, "You see your brother? That's all you have. He is all you have."
Mm-hmm.
That, of course, that resonated with Jack, and that's why you see him basically say, "I'm going to make sure you get out of this alive." Dan continues saying, "However, the plot point about breaking the simpler Nintendo controller felt unrealistic to me. My brother and I went to town on those things, and they never broke, so 0 out of 10 for realism."
They just don't make them like they used to.
They talk about making things Nintendo hard, and you think that's just about how difficult the games were back in the day, but it's also how much that hardware lasts. I mean, at the World of Nintendo store in New York, there is a Game Boy that still functions there. You can see it. And it was in the Gulf War.
Holy
Wow.
shit.
Yeah, it's all melted and blasted as shit, and it still
You know
works.
what? I had a green, that lime green Game Boy Color, and my stupid ass would keep it setting on the heater when I was a kid. Because we never turned on our heaters because we were like, no, just bear it, save the money. But one day we did turn on our heater and it completely like melted and warped the back where the batteries would just barely fit and the cover for the batteries didn't fit anymore. It still worked great.
Oh.
Oh
It
my
was all
god.
warped on the back, but still played great.
That's Nintendo for you.
So, the one thing that Philip Fraccassi wrote wrong is, nah, you should have not gone with Nintendo. Should have gone with another brand. And then his questions are, maybe I wasn't paying enough attention, but I never quite found out what exactly they were doing with the captain when Jim woke up. He had a life vest on and a rope tied around him, and they were raising and lowering him into the ocean. Then he's back on the deck, and no one will cop to just how he died. I think I missed something. Well, I mean, we accidentally
We kind
just
of touched
discussed.
on that a little, yeah. And he was, they were just testing to see how the barnacles will react if they went into the water, I guess.
And the barnacles basically covered his whole body in a very horrifying way.
Not just his covered him, like infested his corpse. Like that was pretty gnarly.
Didn't
That
he?
was one of the most disturbing parts for me was when they like literally punctured him open and all of his innards came out and it was full of the parasites. Like that
Yeah!
was ah.
I was just gonna say, I'm like, didn't that happen? And I was like,
Uh-huh.
oh god, such a horrifying thing. And then he said, favorite sea creatures, real or fantastical? I actually am very partial to the bat rays slash stingrays. I think they're adorable looking sea puppies. Uh, if you go to like an aquarium or something like that, they will literally come up and you can pet. And I've heard that like if you can actually swim with them and then they will lean against you like dogs do, and I'm like, oh my god, that's so adorable. Plus, I love the way that they move.
They have the flaps.
They have the flap flaps like bats and birds. Yeah. What about you guys?
I've always really loved just sharks. I just love all sharks. Great white's my favorite. I think I've said that before. Yeah, no, I just really fucking love sharks. There's other sea life that I also think is cool, but I want a land shark pupper.
Aww.
That's a tough one. I'll say a fish I really like. Have you ever heard of the Picasso triggerfish?
This sounds familiar.
I feel like I have, but I can't picture it.
It's from the tropics, and it's got this really interesting color pattern and this really interesting kind of face. Hence the
Okay,
name.
yeah.
And I just really like the way it looks. That's all.
I'm trying to think of fantastical sea creatures. I mean,
There was, I feel like there was one like ocean cryptid that was pretty cool, and I don't remember what it was called.
I mean, the infamous one is Nessie, of course.
Yeah.
And then...
But Nessie's in a lake, isn't she?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, she is in Italy. What about the Kapus? Are they sea?
No, they're not in the sea.
Well, they can be.
Maybe. I always imagine they're more in like rivers and like creeks and lakes, I think.
All the cryptids that I can think of that are
Were you thinking
water...
of the Ninyo?
Oh,
Like big
white ghostly looking thing that's in the water?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the one I'm thinking of. Also, you know what? There's some jellyfish that are just fucking terrifying.
Oh, yeah.
Sirens, I think, are really fascinating.
Sirens
to
are
me.
cool, yeah. We can go the Kraken. We can go with I mean, just the sea is like fucking terrifying, the depths of the ocean.
Yes.
I find it funny when people are like, oh, what kind of aliens are out there in outer space? I'm like, have you seen the ocean? Like, have you seen the wildlife that's in there? That's basically like alien.
There's some deep sea creatures that are fucking terrifying.
I think it's fascinating that whenever aliens are generally depicted and people want to make them look alien, but they don't have the best sense of how to do it, they often give them aquatic features like tentacles and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And it's because there's the most alien place to us on our planet is the ocean.
Yep.
So, and all kinds of strange things are down there. Anglerfish freak me out. So, like, there's another thing, too. Those things are horrifying looking.
Does Godzilla count?
Sure, we can count Godzilla.
We cannot. I mean,
Any sea-based kaiju, I think, are fine.
I'd be remiss because I think Abby would be annoyed if we didn't say shout out to Cthulhu.
Oh, yeah.
His homeboy Cthulhu.
His good pal Cthulhu.
That's all the questions we have. Do we have any last minute thoughts?
Good read. If you listen to the episode without reading the book, I would go back and read it, even though we just spoiled everything. It's still a fun little romp.
Agreed. I don't really know if I have a ton of closing thoughts about it. I think I got everything I wanted to say.
We got this one, hook, line, and sinker.
Hey!
Yeah.
But yeah, even if you've listened to this and you haven't read it, go read it still. It's got good body horror, good descriptions. The writing is really good, all things considered. And it's a very quick read. It's not so short that you could finish it in 15 minutes. It's still a novella, but it took me only like an hour to read, I want to say. I read it yesterday, and David read it today before this recording. It did not take long.
Not at all.
All right, so for December, it's the holidays. So we're reading a holiday-themed novella, keeping up with the short stories, especially since it is the holidays. And
We all pretty busy.
yeah.
It's nice that we can do a couple short ones in a row, though. I'm good with that.
Yeah, me too.
Usually at the beginning of the year, that's when we're like, all right, let's bring in the big boys.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, no, we'll do another novella, and then we're doing House of Leaves.
Huh?
Don't promise
joking.
that.
I'm joking. I'm 100% joking.
Not promise that yet.
Oh.
We might look into that. It is a good book. It is just very long. So our next read is going to be The Visitor by Sergio Gomez.
Woo!
Woo! If you like what you hear, check out other episodes of Darkly Lit on the Creative Horror Network at creativehorror.com, or check out the YouTube webpage. We're uploading little by little as we go, and hopefully, probably by the end of this year, we'll have all the episodes uploaded. We're getting close, so... Also, check out our other podcasts. We have Undercooked Analysis, Midnight Marinara. We just released a new Midnight Marinara episode for Halloween. Also, you can check out the Jameson tapes, which Sade edits, and I highly recommend that. It seems like a calm night. Probably a good night for fishing.
I got the poles and I got some bait. David's out there already getting the boat revved up. Let's head out.
And I got the booze.
Woo!
Good evening, intrepid listeners. This is the Pasta Shade, the host of Midnight Marinara, and this podcast is part of CreativeHorror.com, a network of podcasts and creators working together to build a constructive community of horror fans. For more content like this, visit us at CreativeHorror.com.